Drew here, and The Handmaid's Tale is back with its 5th season. 6th and final season has already been announced. And the first 2 episodes are now on Hulu. Both of them are directed by Elisabeth Moss. She's been dipping her toes into directing for a little while now. She even directed some episodes of an Apple TV Plus show called Shining Girls, which I'm watching right now and actually really enjoying. And the best thing I can say about her directing here is, as usual, it just seems like typical Handmaid's Tale, excellent directing. Like, it doesn't stand out. It doesn't, in either a good way or a bad way, it doesn't stand out. This episode, spoiler warning, I think the most riveting moment was the ending of the 2nd episode, Ballet, where Serena Waterford, throughout these 2 episodes, she's machinated and worked her manipulations to get this glamorous, pompous ceremony for her husband. And the way that this all broke down, a lot of it I found to be kind of not credible, that the governments would allow Serena to get her way. And honestly, these plot lines were kind of a struggle to watch because Serena has just become completely insufferable. And the fact that she doesn't seem to recognize how some people, such as Mark, might actually view her husband, what kind of monster he really was, that's hard to stomach. But then to watch her go around demanding things and playing the sympathy card as a grieving widow, and it's all clearly her plan to somehow accrue influence and power for herself, and to watch her get her way when I don't really think that people would give her her way given what her husband had done. I don't think that people in Gilead would hold this ceremony for someone that was a traitor, and I don't think that the government of Canada would do what they do here either and let her go to attend her husband's funeral in Gilead. I just don't buy it. But the showrunners are clearly angling for Serena to gain this power because it becomes important to, I think, June's story. I think over the course of these 2 episodes, you see June letting go, accepting that there is no punishment for what she's done and that she just has to learn to live with herself. I thought the scene between her and the judge when the judge tells her that you just have to accept that if there's no punishment, that's between you and whatever deity you prefer. I thought that was a very telling scene. And if there is no deity, then there is no punishment, and what you've done doesn't matter by implication. But I think, though, that she's kind of coming to peace. I think in the 2nd episode, you see her bury the gun and kind of accepting that she's not going to go and commit more violent acts. You remember that line that Commander Lawrence said to her at the end of last season, that whatever they did to Fred, it would not be enough. And I think that June has finally come to realize that, and her response to her fellow former handmaidens and Marthas who want to return and get revenge on their former masters, their mistresses, on their commanders, and her questioning of them on that point and pointing out that that's not going to accomplish anything and it's going to get you killed. I think she's finally come to the realization that the pursuit of this isn't going to help her, even if it's hard to watch people like Serena get away with their horrible, horrible actions. But at the end of this episode, you see her at this ballet with Luke, and she's finally coming to accept it. And I love the way that this was shot, the way that they had her be the only one wearing a light outfit in this whole group so that she really pops out. And symbolically, I think they did this intentionally to contrast her and Serena, who's obviously wearing black at the funeral. And the way that they are contrasting and juxtaposing these characters, how they're both, of the 2 of them, it's actually, I think, June, in a sense, who has more grief over the death of Fred, not because of him necessarily. I don't think anyone grieves his death, really, deep down, but at what it cost her, and at this realization that she's going to have to live with the guilt of it. And I think in Serena's case, it's very obvious that she's just using Fred's death to gain herself power and influence. And there's that little smirk that she gets at the funeral that I think is really telling. And I love the way that they shot the final moments of this episode, setting up this confrontation between the two very clearly, that just when June thought she was out, Serena draws her back in. Otherwise, this episode, I thought that there was obviously a very shocking scene, and I'm not sure how this will play out going forward. I would be surprised if both Janine and Esther actually turned out to be dead, but I guess it could be the case, because obviously, as is the case with Emily, there are worse ways to be written off a show. At least this would have been an impactful ending, and kind of like Sydney Sweeney's exit in season 3, I believe, might have been season 2. It could be just, giving a tragic arc to Mckenna Grace and to Janine. But maybe one of them will survive and not the other, who knows. I think that it was, very telling that the response, obviously Esther has been playing the game. She's allowed Janine to convince her that if she goes along with Gilead's rules and follows obediently what they want from her, that at the end of the day it will be better for her. But then she's realized that if she does that, all she has to look forward to is rape by this commander. And the very creepy scene between them, obviously handled with restraint. I appreciated that. Mckenna Grace is very young still, so I think though the ick factor was still enough, with just the use of the chocolates and emphasizing her youth and how he sees her still as young and easily placatable by chocolates, and yet he still is interested in her sexually. I think that's very disturbing. And who can really blame Esther for this decision to poison herself and to take Janine with her? Janine obviously has always been someone who was more willing to play the game and go along with things after early seasons where she was a little bit less cowed. And I think that at this point, the character, they've done basically all that they can do with the character. We've seen her as a handmaid before. We've seen her escape. You kind of know who she is, and she hasn't really demonstrated much capacity for growth beyond who she is now. So I would be sad for her to suffer this fate, but I wouldn't be as surprised if that was where the writers took her. As far as Mckenna Grace, I think there's more room for this character to grow, and I feel like it's important that we have handmaids in Gilead that we can witness and relate to. Otherwise, we might lose track of what Gilead really is. So I hope that they have an intention for this character, that they're going to perhaps have her interact more with Aunt Lydia. But it could be that this is just the end of the road. Mckenna Grace is obviously a very busy actress, so perhaps they just wanted to give her a tragic arc. And as I said, this is not the worst way to have a character exit a show. Alexis Bledel, you just have Elisabeth Moss is June show up at her house and question, what happened? She's like, oh, she's gone back to Gilead. She's working with an organization, the Red Cross. It's like very much, well, I guess that's one way for a character to exit a show. There wasn't necessarily a lot more to do with Emily now that she's in Canada. But at the same time, you would have liked to have one last scene with Alexis Bledel after all these seasons with the character. Just saying, it felt a little like maybe don't even have that scene if you're not actually going to have Alexis Bledel in this season. I don't know. It might have gone down a little less bitterly. So on the whole, this show is strong in the ways that it's always been strong. The visuals are very good, some of the best cinematography on television. I did find it bizarre that this funeral is, supposedly going to win sympathy for Serena and because of the pomp and the spectacle, but nobody watches funerals unless you're the Queen of England. May she rest in peace. Nobody cares about your funeral and the big ceremony that you have. And I just don't buy that Canadians who have been at war with this country and have seen just the atrocities perpetrated by Gilead are just going to turn around and be like, hey, they had a cool funeral. I kind of feel bad for these guys. Maybe they aren't so bad after all. They're actually sad when someone they love dies. No, I don't buy it. So all in all, like the majority of this episode I found annoying because it was watching Serena be stupid and get her way despite being stupid. And then, watching June go through a lot of the same beats we've already seen her go through. All in all, in seasons 3 and 4, at times I questioned whether the show had potential to grow and potential to keep going. And at this point, I'm not questioning that anymore because I feel like it's pretty obvious that it doesn't. It's very much spinning its wheels. And I don't want to step on anyone's toes. I understand if you're still enjoying this show, but I think it's a really bad sign when you hear a show has been renewed for another season before the season that you're watching starts, and your primary reaction is, and this is my primary reaction anyway, oh man, I kind of hope they'd be done with this season. I just think it's time for them to resolve this and to close the curtain on this act. I don't know, maybe there's room for a spinoff like The Testaments. I kind of feel like they've kind of maybe undercut that series a lot with all that they've done with Aunt Lydia here and all the other characters. I'm just not sure how much room there is for that series. I feel Gilead feels pretty well explored at this point. So those are just my thoughts for what they are worth. Let me know what you thought in the comments. If you're interested in seeing me do more reviews of this show and of other shows, please consider subscribing to the channel. And as always, thanks for watching.